Studies conducted to establish the pharmacodynamic effects and the mode of action and potential side effects should also be evaluated, and consideration should be given to the significance of any issues that arise. Okay, now they said that the evaluation of toxicology studies should be arranged in a logical order so that all relevant data elucidating a certain effect or phenomena are brought together. Extrapolation of the data from animals to humans should be considered in relation to what animal species were used, what were the number of animals that were used, what was the route of administration employed, dosages used, duration of treatment of the study, systemic exposure, and the effect of drug substance observed in non-clinical studies and in relation to what observed in humans. Now, non-clinical written and tabulated summaries. So what we just learned right now was about non-clinical overview. What we are going to learn now will be about non-clinical written and tabulated summaries. So the sequence and content of non-clinical written summary sections will be taught you right now, and it should be emphasized that no guideline can cover all the eventualities, and common sense and a clear focus on the needs of regulatory authority assessors are the best guides to constructing an acceptable document. Therefore, applicants can modify the format if needed to provide the best possible presentation of the information in order to facilitate the understanding and whatever will be the evaluation of the result. Now, whenever appropriate, the age, gender related effect should be discussed, and relevant findings with the stereoisomer or the metabolite should also be included as appropriate. Now, consistent uses of units throughout the summaries will facilitate their review, and a table for converting the units might also help, because you don't know which country might follow what kind of unit. So a conversion table of such sort would also be of great help. Now, what is the general presentation? Okay, now what will happen is, whenever in discussion and conclusion section, wherever there is a discussion or conclusion section, information should be integrated across studies and across species, and exposure in the test animal should be related to exposure in humans given the maximum intended doses. So there should be a cross reference to the humans and animals trials given. Okay, now the general presentation issues is order of presentation of information within sections, right? When available, in vitro studies should precede in vivo. Okay, so wherever it is possible, the in vivo studies should always be first mentioned and described, then the in vivo. So first you have to write in vitro, first you have to write about the in vitro studies and then the in vivo studies. Where multiple studies of the same type needs to be summarized within the pharmacokinetic and toxicological section, study should be ordered by. अगर आपको ऐसी कोई समरी है जो कि सेम टाइप की है, उसको आपको समराइज करना है फार्माकोकाइनेटिक टॉक्सिकोलॉजिकल सेक्शन में, तो इट शुड बी ऑर्डर्ड बाय लाइक स्पीशीज, रूट ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन एंड देन बाय ड्यूरेशन. ड्यूरेशन में भी कैसे, जो शॉर्टेस्ट ड्यूरेशन का पहले होगा वो पहले लिखना है. Then species should be ordered as follows, like mouse, okay, mouse, rat, hamster, if there is any other rodent than that, rabbit, dog, non-human primate, other non-rodent animals or non-mammals. And then route of administration could be like whatever the intended use of intended route for human use would be oral, IV, intramuscular, intraperitoneal, subcutaneous, inhalation, topical, and other. Now, use of table and figures. So, like, although the non-clinical written summaries are envisaged to be composed mainly of text and some important content within them might be more effectively or concisely communicated through the use of appropriate tables and figures. So to allow authors flexibility in defining optimal structures, so the written summaries and table figures should be preferably be included within the text. Alternatively, they could be grouped together at end of each of the non-clinical written summaries. So अगर हम बात करें, इन्होंने कहा कि विजुअल प्रेजेंटेशन से एक्सप्लेन करना इज द बेस्ट वे एंड इट इज एनकरेज. सो देर आर टू वेज. प्राइमरली it should be mentioned within the text, like मैंने यहाँ कुछ लिखा उसका visual presentation, or at the end of each non-clinical written summaries. And throughout the text, references, citation to the tabulated summaries should be included in the following format. So you can say that table x.x study / report number, ऐसा करके you can cross reference it also. And the length of non-clinical written summaries, although there is no formal limit to the length of non-clinical written summaries, it is recommended that the total length of 3 non-clinical written summaries should not exceed 100 to 150 pages. Sequence of the written summaries and tabulated summaries should follow the following order, and it is recommended. And what is the order? So first you will write about the introduction, then a written summary of pharmacology, tabulated summary of pharmacology. Then you can write about the written summary of pharmacokinetics and tabulated summary of pharmacokinetics. Then you can write about the written summary of toxicology and tabulated summary of toxicology. So what? 3 things: pharmacology, pharmacokinetics and toxicology. इसका क्या? written or tabulated, written or tabulated, written or tabulated, introduction starting में. So this is your sequence of writing summaries. Then what would be the contents of it? Like what would be the content? So introduction में क्या रहेगा? The main aim of introduction is what? To introduce the reviewer to the pharmaceutical and its proposed clinical use. तो उसके following key elements should be covered होने चाहिए, like brief information concerning pharmaceutical structure, preferably a structure diagram should be provided, and pharmacological properties and information concerning the pharmaceutical proposed clinical indication, dose and duration of use. फिर आता है pharmacology की written summary, which is this one, the second one. So that is the section that is covered in 2.6.2. 2.6.1 is about the introduction. 2.6.2 is about the written summary of pharmacology. तो विद इन फार्माकोलॉजी रिटन समरी उसमें भी डेटा कैसे अरेंज होना चाहिए कि 2.6.2.1 में यू शुड राइट अबाउट द ब्रीफ समरी. Brief summary. कैसे? The principal findings from the pharmacology study should be briefly summarized, approximately 2 to 3 pages. मतलब आप already summary दे रहे हो, and within that summary whatever would be the pharmacology related summary, that should be given in 2 to 3 pages. And the section should begin with a brief description of the contents of pharmacological data package, pointing out any notable aspects such as inclusion or exclusion of a particular data, like lack of an animal model. 2.2 is what? Primary pharmacodynamics. So studies on primary pharmacodynamics should be summarized and evaluated. Wherever possible, it would be helpful to relate the pharmacology of the drug to available data in terms of safety and potency or other drugs in the class. Similarly, इसका 2.3 आता है, 2.6.2.3, and that is secondary pharmacodynamics. Secondary pharmacodynamics, studies on the secondary pharmacodynamics should be summarized by the organ system wherever appropriate and evaluated in this section. Then 2.4 is safety pharmacology. is safety pharmacology. So safety pharmacology should be studies should be summarized and evaluated in this section, and in some cases secondary pharmacodynamic can contribute to safety evaluation. Okay, so in such cases these secondary pharmacodynamic studies should also be considered along with the safety pharmacologic studies. फिर 2.5 सेक्शन आता है फार्माकोडायनामिक ड्रग इंटरैक्शन. Drug interaction, if they have been performed, so you can write about the drug interactions. Then 2.6 is discussion and conclusions. So it provides an opportunity to discuss pharmacologic evaluation, whatever you might have evaluated from the studies, to consider the significance of issues that arise. And 2.7 is lastly the tables and figures. So in this section the text, tables and figures can be included, and it can also be alternatively included at the end of the summary. Now similarly 2.6.2 क्या था, pharmacology का written summary. 2.6.3, this was 2.6.2, this is 2.6.3, is tabulated summary of pharmacology. ठीक है, तो इसमें भी सेम है. फर्स्ट वुड बी योर brief summary. Second, तो brief summary में वही की principal findings 2 to 3 pages and description of the scope of this pharmacokinetic evaluation, emphasizing for example whether the species and strains examined were those used in pharmacology and toxicological evaluations, and whether the formulation used was similar or identical. And then method of analysis is something new you'll look at here. Method of analysis. In this section should contain a brief summary of the method of analysis for what? Biological samples, including detection and quantification limits of an analytical procedure, and if possible, validation data for the analytical method and stability of biological samples should be discussed in this section. So the potential impact of different methods of analysis on the interpretation of the result should be discussed in the following relevant sections. फिर थर्ड में आ जाएगा आपका 2.6.4.3 में absorption. The following data should be summarized in this section. Whatever absorption is, the extent and rate of absorption, and kinetic parameters, bioequivalence और bioavailability. This is important because ये आपको tricky questions में आएगा आगे चल के. So you should for right now remember कि इसमें 2 point cover हो रहे हैं, absorption and what? Bioavailability. क्योंकि कई बार क्या होता है कि आपकी ड्रग ब्रांडेड नहीं है, आपकी ड्रग क्या है, आपकी ड्रग है जेनेरिक ड्रग, बट आपको परमिशन तो फिर भी लेनी पड़ेगी. तो उन केसेस में जब मेरा ऑलरेडी ब्रांडेड ड्रग मार्केटेड है, मैं उस पर क्लिनिकल ट्रायल्स करके और खर्चा क्यों करूँगी. सो इन दैट केस बायोवेक्यूलेंस बायोवेलिटी स्टडीज से भी काम चल जाता है. सो समटाइम्स दे आस्क दिस ट्रिकी क्वेश्चन कि मेंशन दैट सेक्शन इफ आई वांट टू go with just my bioavailability bioequivalence study. So you can easily say कि module basically it is part of non-clinical summaries ना, तो you can say summary part तो हम mention नहीं करेंगे. जब ये part आएगा module 4 में तब हम इसके बारे में अच्छे से discuss करेंगे. summary में you can say it is talked in section 2.6.4.3, that is non-clinical summaries. Then point 4 discusses about what? It discusses about distribution. So the following data should be summarized in this section. Tissue distribution studies, protein binding and distribution in blood cells, and placental transfer studies. Okay, fifth आता है metabolism. बेसिकली यहाँ पे आप अब तक तो समझ ही गए होगे काय की बात चल रही है, that is ADME. The sixth one would be excretion. Let's first understand metabolism में क्या कह रहे हो. So metabolism में interspecies comparison and how the chemical structures and quantities of metabolites in biologic samples, possible metabolic pathways, pre-systemic metabolism like it is like hepatic first pass effects है या फिर GI के through, in vitro metabolism including P450 studies and enzyme induction and inhibition. वहीं excretion पे आए तो route of and extent of excretion and excretion in milk. ओके, बिकॉज वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट लैक्टेटिंग वुमेन्स है. फिर आता है सेक्शन फार्माकोकाइनेटिक ड्रग इंटरेक्शन. सेवेंथ इज फार्माकोकाइनेटिक drug interaction. If there's any studies performed for this, then that. Any other pharmacokinetic studies, then that should be mentioned in this section. एग्जाम्पल के तौर पे रीनली इम्पेयर्ड एनिमल्स पे अगर आपने कोई स्टडी की तो इट कैन बी समराइज इन दिस. देन 9th सेक्शन में आता है डिस्कशन एंड कंक्लूजन. एंड 10th सेक्शन में आता है टेबल्स या फिर कोई फिगर्स आपने यूज़ किए हो तो. Text table figures can be included at appropriate points throughout the summary within the text, or alternatively there is an option of including tables and figures at the end of the summary. Now there is another section, that is pharmacokinetics, tabulated summary, and toxicologically फिर आता है रिटन समरी ऑफ टॉक्सिकोलॉजी. आई जस्ट वांट टू मेक अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ करेक्शन हेयर कि जहाँ हमने इसको मान के डिस्कस किया ना, दिस व्हाट वी डिस्कस वाज 2.6.4. दिस इज व्हाट वी डिस्कस्ड इन द बायो इक्विवेलेंस. और क्योंकि टैबुलेटेड में क्या रहेगा, दिस इज सेम, दिस विल बी सेम. ओके, एंड देन रिटन में जो रहेगा वही टैबुलेटेड में रहेगा. तो जो हमने यहाँ पे फार्माकोकाइनेटिक्स डिस्कस किया, this one 2.6.4. okay, that is what we discussed about this here 2.6.4. यहाँ से जो हमने चालू किया था मेथड ऑफ एनालिसिस ब्रीफ, दिस वाज अबाउट फार्माकोकाइनेटिक. अब जो हम डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं इसका टैबुलेटेड समरी यही रहेगा. नाउ वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस अबाउट द रिटन समरी ऑफ टॉक्सिकोलॉजी. दैट विल बी योर 2.6.5 2.6.6. सो नीचे आ जाते हैं. दैट इज 2.6.6 टॉक्सिकोलॉजी रिटन समरी. तो फर्स्ट क्या होगा हमारा, ब्रीफ डिस्क्रिप्शन, ब्रीफ समरी. इसमें क्या आएगा कि whatever would be your principal findings from toxicology study should be briefly summarized in few pages, and it can't be more than 6 pages, not more than 6 pages. In this section, the extent of toxicological evaluation can be indicated by the use of table listing principal toxicological studies, and results should not be presented in the table. For example, the scope of toxicologic evaluation should be described in relation to the proposed clinical use. A comment on the GLP status of the study should be included. फिर इसका सेकेंड पार्ट है सिंगल डोज टॉक्सिसिटी. The single dose data should be very briefly summarized in order by species, by route. In some instances, it might be useful to provide the data in table form. And third आता है repeat dose toxicity. So again the same, by species, by route, and by duration. By species, by route, by duration, and whatever methodology were used, whatever highlights you want to give that. फिर फोर्थ आता है जीनोटॉक्सिसिटी. जीनोटॉक्सिसिटी में स्टडी शुड ब्रीफली समराइज इन द फॉलोइंग ऑर्डर, लाइक इन विट्रो mammalian cell system, in vitro mammalian non-mammalian cell system, and in vivo mammalian system including supportive and other systems. Then about carcinogenicity, तो brief rationale should explain why the studies were chosen and the basis for high dose selection. In individual study should be summarized in the following order, like लॉन्ग टर्म स्टडीज, लाइक शॉर्ट टर्म, मिड टर्म स्टडीज, या फिर कोई और स्टडी हुई हो तो. सिक्स्थ पॉइंट है रिप्रोडक्टिव एंड डेवलपमेंटल टॉक्सिसिटी. ओके, कोई फर्टिलिटी या अर्ली एम्ब्रियोनिक डेवलपमेंट में, या फिर एम्ब्रियो फीटल डेवलपमेंट में, प्री नेटल, पोस्ट नेटल डेवलपमेंट में, ऐसे करके. Then seventh is discuss about local tolerance. If local tolerance studies have been performed, they should be summarized in order by species, by route, and by duration, giving brief details of the methodology and highlighting important findings. Then eighth is other toxicity studies. If there is any other toxicity like immunotoxicity, mechanistic study, dependent studies on metabolites, studies on impurities, or any other kind of, or antigenicity, that all could be mentioned in this section. And any other studies. And the ninth is discussion and conclusion. And 10th is any tables or figures that you want to attach. So this was about toxicologic written, right? अब आएगा toxicology tabulated summary. तो non-clinical tabulated summary, it is recommended that summary tables for non-clinical information in the common technical documents be provided in the format outlined in this guidelines, and applicants can modify the format if needed to provide the best possible presentation of the information and to facilitate the understanding of the evaluation. ठीक है, ये गाइडलाइन इसीलिए नहीं बनाई, मतलब इसलिए is not intended to indicate what studies are requested, but to advise how to tabulate the study reports if a study is performed. So if you need to add some items or delete some items from the cited format where appropriate, you can do that. One tabular format can contain results from several studies, and alternatively it may be appropriate to cite the data resulting from one study in several tabular formats. And whatever you are doing, it should be at a sufficient level and the details is available to the reviewer and should provide the information. So this was all about the safety part of it. In the next video we'll discuss about the efficacy one, that is M4R. So we'll discuss about that efficacy one. Okay, till then, like, share, subscribe.